Kelvin woke up with his neck killing him. It took him a second to remember where he was. His boss's apartment. On her couch. The expensive kind that looks good but feels like concrete. He heard someone moving around in the kitchen. He turned his head, and there she was. Rose Chun, his CO, standing there with a coffee mug, like it was any other morning. Like last night never happened. She said his name. Asked him about that senior director position he'd been wanting. But the way she said it wasn't friendly. It was cold, accusing. She asked if he thought driving her home drunk was his audition for a promotion. Kelvin couldn't speak. His mouth just hung open. Then he saw it. A folder with his name on the coffee table. Her laptop opened to an email. The subject line said something about inappropriate conduct. His name was right there. Now let me tell you who Kelvin really was. He was 35. Single dad. His wife died when Leo was 2. Cancer. It happened fast. Since then, it had just been him and his son. Leo was 7 now. Smart kid. Loved building things with Legos. Every single morning, Kelvin made him breakfast. Usually pancakes. The healthy kind with whole wheat flour, because he was trying to be a good dad. Leo always complained. Wanted the regular ones. But he ate them anyway. Kelvin would pack Leo's lunch. Turkey sandwich. Apple slices. Those little dinosaur cookies. Then they'd walk 3 blocks to the bus stop. Same route every day. And every day, Kelvin would tell his son the same thing. When someone needs help, you help them. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter if it's hard. You just help. That's how Kelvin's parents raised him. That's how he was raising Leo. His job at Helix Tech wasn't glamorous. Operations manager. Behind-the-scenes stuff. Making sure things ran smoothly. But it paid well. Good health insurance. And there was that senior director position opening up. If he got it, that was a 40% raise. That meant Leo's college fund could actually be real. That meant he could stop worrying every time the car made a weird noise. Rose Chin was different from anyone Kelvin had ever worked for. She'd been CEO for 6 months. Came in like a hurricane. Fired 3 executives in the first week. Restructured everything. People were terrified of her. But the company was doing better. Stock price up. Investors happy. Nobody could argue with results. She didn't do small talk. Didn't come to office parties. Just worked 16-hour days and went home. Kelvin respected her. From a distance. Everyone did. But he noticed things. Like how she never ate lunch with anyone. How she stayed late on Fridays when everyone else left early. How her jaw would tighten whenever Marcus Thorne walked in a room. Marcus Thorne, VP of Business Development. 42. Expensive suits. The kind of guy who called everyone buddy but never meant it. He'd been at Helix for 5 years. Longer than Rose. Everyone knew he thought he should have gotten the CEO job instead of her. Nobody said it out loud. But everyone knew. So here's what happened the night before. There was this investor dinner. Marcus's idea. Celebrating 10 years of Helix Tech. Showing off to the money people. Making them feel good about writing bigger checks. Kelvin wasn't supposed to be there. He was operations, not investor-facing. But someone got food poisoning, and they needed a warm body to fill a seat. So Kelvin put on his one decent suit and showed up. The restaurant was one of those places where they don't list prices on the menu. You just know everything costs more than your rent. Private room, crystal chandelier, waiters in bow ties. Rose was already there when Kelvin arrived. She looked perfect. Black dress, hair pulled back, diamond earrings that probably cost more than Kelvin's car. But her eyes looked tired, really tired. Marcus was working the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud. Being Marcus, the dinner started. Speeches happened. Toasts. Everyone saying the right corporate things. Rose stood up and talked about the company's future. Her voice was strong, confident, but Kelvin saw her hand shake when she picked up her wine glass. Then she drank it, fast, and poured another. By the time they brought out dessert, she'd had 5 glasses, maybe 6. Kelvin lost count. Marcus was going on about quarterly projections to some investor. Rose was laughing at someone's joke, but it sounded forced. Wrong. Around 11, the dinner ended. Handshakes. Business cards exchanged. The investors left first. Marcus walked over to Rose and offered her a ride home. Rose's whole face changed. Just for a second, something like panic flashed across it. She said no, really sharp, angry almost. Marcus just shrugged and left. Everyone filtered out. Kelvin hung back because Rose was gripping the table like she might fall over. He asked if she wanted a ride. She stared at him for a long time, like she was trying to figure out if it was a trap. Then she just said okay. His car wasn't impressive. Old Honda, dent in the back bumper. Leo's car seat still in the back. But Rose didn't say anything about it. She just got in. He started driving. She gave him her address. 30 minutes across town. For the first 10 minutes, she was quiet. Kelvin thought maybe she'd fall asleep. Then she started talking. She asked if he knew what it was like to be in charge while knowing someone was trying to destroy you. Kelvin said no. He kept his eyes on the road. She said Marcus's name like it was poison. Said he was planning a hostile takeover. That the next board meeting was when it would happen. She said Marcus had been building a case against her for months, making her look unstable, making himself look indispensable. The board was going to vote, and he'd already convinced 3 members. Just needed 2 more. Her words were slurred, but the details were clear. She told Kelvin everything. How Marcus had been falsifying performance reports. How he'd been manipulating metrics to make her decisions look bad. Names of board members. Specific numbers. Everything. Kelvin didn't know what to say. He just kept driving. They got to her building. Fancy place. Doorman out front. The works. Rose tried to get out of the car and nearly fell. Kelvin caught her, helped her inside. The doorman looked concerned, but didn't ask questions. They took the elevator to the 14th floor. Her apartment was exactly what Kelvin expected. Modern, minimalist, cold. Everything was white or gray or glass. Rose collapsed onto her couch, told Kelvin thank you, said he was good, not like the others. Then her eyes closed. Kelvin should have left right then. He knew it. But what if she got sick? What if something happened? She could barely move. He texted Leo's babysitter. Said he'd be late. Work emergency. He'd pay extra. Then he sat down in the chair across from the couch, just to make sure Rose was okay. He'd leave as soon as she was stable. Maybe an hour. He must have fallen asleep, because the next thing he knew, it was morning and Rose was standing over him with coffee, accusing him of manipulation. She told him Marcus had sent her an email that morning, with evidence. That Kelvin had been positioning himself for weeks, undermining her, waiting for her to mess up so he could swoop in. Kelvin tried to explain, said he was just trying to help. Rose laughed, said Marcus had emails, documentation. That proposal Kelvin wrote 3 months ago about restructuring operations, about how the company needed stronger leadership at every level. She asked if that was about her. Kelvin's head was spinning. That proposal was about efficiency, about workflow improvements. It had nothing to do with Rose. He tried to explain, but Rose cut him off, said he knew she'd be vulnerable last night, that he'd waited, driven her home, stayed in her apartment. asked what he thought would happen. If she'd be so grateful she'd just hand him a promotion. Kelvin stood up. His heart was pounding. He said no. He stayed because she could barely walk. Because leaving her alone felt wrong. That was it. Rose asked him to explain the email Marcus sent. Explain why he'd been asking about the senior director position for months. Explain why he volunteered to drive her when nobody else did. Kelvin couldn't explain. Not without telling her what she'd said last night. Not without exposing how drunk she was. How she'd spilled every secret about Marcus's takeover plot. If he told her that she was finished, the board would hear about it. Everyone would know their CEO got so drunk she leaked confidential information to an operations manager. He told her he couldn't explain. She asked if he couldn't or wouldn't. He said he was just trying to do the right thing. Rose's expression didn't change. She told him HR would contact him Monday. Until then, he was suspended. Kelvin tried to say something, but she just told him to leave. He left. The whole drive home, his hands were shaking. He didn't understand what had just happened. He'd helped her, protected her, and now he was suspended. When he got home, the babysitter was gone. Leo was eating cereal in front of the TV. His son ran over and asked where he'd been. Kelvin said it was a work thing. Leo asked if he was okay because he looked weird. Kelvin forced a smile, said he was fine, but his phone buzzed right then. Email from HR, meeting scheduled for Monday at 9. Subject line, disciplinary review. Leo was still watching him. Asked if he got in trouble. Kelvin said no. Leo asked why he looked sad then. Kelvin sat down and pulled his son onto his lap. He told Leo that sometimes you do the right thing and people don't understand. They think you did something wrong even when you didn't. Leo asked if that's what happened. Kelvin said yes. Leo said then they'd figure out. Kelvin wished it was that simple, but he knew it wasn't. Monday came too fast. Kelvin dropped Leo off at school. His son hugged him and said he had this. Kelvin wished that was true. The HR office was on the 3rd floor. Small room, white walls, no windows. Jennifer from HR was there, mid-40s, always looked uncomfortable during these kinds of meetings. Marcus Thorne was there too. That's when Kelvin knew this was bad. Jennifer told him to sit, said this was just a preliminary conversation. They received a complaint about his conduct Friday night. Kelvin said he drove Miss Chin home. That was it. Marcus leaned forward with that smile, said that wasn't quite it though. Said Kelvin had stayed in her apartment overnight. Kelvin explained she was drunk. He stayed to make sure she was safe. Marcus called it noble. Then he slid a folder across the table. It was Kelvin's proposal from 3 months ago, the one about restructuring operations. Marcus said it read like a critique of Rose's leadership, pointed to a line where Kelvin had written that current decision-making processes were creating bottlenecks, called it a direct attack. Kelvin said no. It was about efficiency, about helping the company. Marcus pulled out more papers, printed emails, 5 separate conversations where Kelvin had asked about the senior director position, where he'd made it clear he felt ready for advancement. Kelvin said that was called ambition, not a crime. Marcus's smile got wider, said no, but combined with Friday night, it painted a picture, an ambitious employee, frustrated with leadership, waiting for an opportunity. And when the CEO got vulnerable, he took advantage. Jennifer looked at the papers, looked at Kelvin, asked if he had anything to say. Kelvin could have told them everything. About Marcus's takeover plot, about Rose's drunken confession, about all the details she'd spilled in the car, but that would destroy Rose. It would prove she was unstable. It would prove Marcus right. So Kelvin said no. He didn't have anything to say. He just did what he thought was right. Marcus said that's unfortunate. because the evidence suggested otherwise. Jennifer said they'd need to conduct a full investigation. Until then, Kelvin was officially suspended, with pay for now, but that could change depending on what they found. Kelvin asked if he could speak to Rose. Marcus said Ms. Chun was the one who'd requested this investigation. She didn't want to see him. Kelvin left the building feeling like he might throw up. He sat in his car for 20 minutes. Just sat there. His phone rang. His friend David from accounting. David said the whole office was talking. Said Marcus was telling everyone Kelvin had tried to take advantage of Rose. That he'd been planning it for months. Kelvin hung up. He couldn't listen to it. The next few days were hell. He stayed home with Leo. Told his son he was working from home for a bit. Leo asked why. Kelvin said sometimes jobs needed to do that. Leo didn't buy it, but he didn't push. Kelvin's phone kept buzzing. Messages from co-workers. Some supportive. Most weren't. People he thought were friends suddenly going silent. Marcus was working fast. Spreading his version of the story, making Kelvin look like a predator, like someone who'd been waiting for Rose to slip up so he could manipulate her. By Wednesday, the story had evolved. Now, people were saying Kelvin had been alone with Rose in her apartment for hours, that he refused to leave, that she'd woken up scared and confused. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. Marcus had the narrative. He had evidence. He had Rose on his side. Thursday afternoon, Kelvin got another email. The investigation was being expedited. They'd found additional concerning behavior. A meeting with the board was scheduled for Monday. Kelvin was expected to attend. He called Jennifer from HR, asked what additional behavior they'd found. She said she couldn't discuss it, but she sounded sorry. That's how Kelvin knew it was really bad. That night, Leo asked him again what was wrong. Kelvin tried to say nothing, but Leo just looked at him with those big eyes and said he knew something was wrong. Said his teacher at school told him sometimes grown-ups need to talk about their problems too. So Kelvin told him, not everything, but enough. Said he'd help someone at work, and now people thought he'd done it for the wrong reasons. Leo asked if he did. Kelvin said no. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Leo thought about it for a minute. Then he said that's what mattered. If you did the right thing, then it didn't matter what other people thought, because you knew the truth. Kelvin pulled his son into a hug. Wished the world worked the way Leo thought it did. But it didn't. In the real world, perception was everything. And Marcus had spent the week making sure everyone's perception of Kelvin was poisoned. Friday, Kelvin got a call from a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. It was Rose's assistant. Quiet voice. Nervous. Said she wasn't supposed to be calling, but she'd found something. A document on Rose's desk. Something Kelvin had left before the investor dinner. The assistant said Rose hadn't looked at it yet, but she would. And when she did, everything would change. Kelvin asked what document. The assistant said it was his analysis of the quarterly reports, the one where he'd found discrepancies in Marcus's numbers, where he'd highlighted inconsistencies that didn't add up. Kelvin had left it for Rose before the dinner, just in case she needed it. He'd forgotten about it after everything that happened. The assistant said she had to go, but she wanted Kelvin to know someone believed him. Then she hung up. Kelvin sat there staring at his phone. That document. He'd spent 2 weeks on it, going through every report Marcus had submitted for the past 6 months, finding the patterns, the altered numbers, the fabricated metrics. He'd meant to present it to Rose formally, but then the dinner happened, and everything went sideways. If Rose looked at that document, she'd see it. She'd see what Marcus was really doing. She'd see that Kelvin had been trying to help her long before that night, that he wasn't some opportunist waiting for her to fall. He was the one person who'd actually been on her side. But would she look at it? Or would Marcus get there first? Listen, if you made it this far in the story, you're invested. You want to know what happens to Kelvin. But here's the thing. Most people scroll past these stories without subscribing. They watch, they enjoy, and they disappear. If this story matters to you, if you actually care how it ends, hit that subscribe button, please. It takes 2 seconds. And if you don't, you'll probably forget about this channel and never another amazing stories from me. Rose didn't sleep much that weekend. She kept thinking about Kelvin's face when she'd accused him. How shocked he looked. How he couldn't even defend himself. Marcus had been in her ear all week, telling her she needed to be careful. That Kelvin was dangerous. That he'd been planning this for months. Marcus had evidence. Documents. Email chains. It all looked damning. But something felt wrong. Rose couldn't put her finger on it. She'd built her career on instincts. And her instincts were screaming at her now. Saturday night, she went to her office. The building was empty. She sat at her desk and stared at the pile of papers. That's when she saw it. A manila folder she didn't remember. Her assistant's handwriting on a sticky note. From Kelvin Brooks, left before the dinner. Rose opened it. Inside was a detailed analysis of the quarterly reports. Kelvin's analysis. He'd gone through every single report Marcus had submitted for the past 6 months. Highlighted discrepancies. Noted inconsistencies. Found patterns in the data that didn't make sense. The timestamp on the document was from 2 weeks before the investor dinner, before Rose got drunk, before any of this started. Kelvin had been investigating Marcus, not undermining Rose, protecting her. Rose felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd accused an innocent man. She believed Marcus over the one person who'd actually been trying to help her. She called her head of security, told him she needed everything. Building footage from the past week, access to any recordings, company car logs, everything. He called her back Sunday morning, said he'd found something. The company car Kelvin drove that night had a dash cam, standard for all company vehicles. The footage was stored on a secure server. Did she want to see it? Rose said yes. The security chief sent her the file. She opened it on her laptop, watched the whole thing, watched Kelvin help her into his car, watched himself drive carefully, checking on her every few minutes, heard her own slurred voice spilling secrets about Marcus, about the takeover, about everything. And Kelvin? He didn't take advantage. Didn't press for information. Just listened. Just drove. Just made sure she got home safe. The footage continued. Showed him helping her into her building. The timestamp showed him leaving the apartment building at 7 a.m. Nothing happened. He'd stayed on her couch. That's it. Rose closed her laptop. Put her head in her hands. She destroyed a good man's reputation because she'd been paranoid, because she believed Marcus's lies over Kelvin's integrity. Monday morning, Rose called an emergency board meeting. Full board, all executives, everyone. Marcus showed up looking confident, smug even. He thought this was about finalizing Kelvin's termination, maybe even discussing his takeover plans. He was wrong. Rose stood at the head of the conference table. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She pulled up Kelvin's document on the big screen. The analysis he'd done showed every discrepancy he'd found in Marcus's reports. Then she told the board she'd had an independent audit done over the weekend, paid extra for rush service. The auditors confirmed everything Kelvin had found. Marcus had been falsifying data for 8 months, creating fake metrics, making Rose's decisions look bad while making himself look indispensable. Marcus's face went white. He started to speak, but Rose held up her hand. She played the dashcam footage. Not the whole thing. Just enough. Showed Kelvin helping her into the car. showed the timestamp proving when he left, showed that nothing inappropriate had happened, that he'd simply done the decent thing. Then Rose read from the complaint Marcus had filed, pointed out every lie, every manipulation, every piece of evidence that Marcus had fabricated or taken out of context. She turned to Marcus. Her voice was ice. Told him he was fired. Effective immediately. Security would escort him out. Legal would be in touch about potential charges for fraud and defamation. Marcus tried to argue, tried to talk his way out of it. But Rose had the board with her now. They'd seen the evidence. They knew what he'd done. 2 security guards walked Marcus out. He was shouting, saying Rose would regret this, that he'd sue, that he'd destroy her. Nobody listened. When the conference room was quiet again, Rose looked at the board, told them she'd made a terrible mistake. She'd accused an innocent employee of misconduct. She'd let paranoia cloud her judgment. She'd almost destroyed a good man's career because she believed lies over evidence. She said she was promoting Kelvin Brooks to Senior Director of Operations, effective immediately, with a full public apology and compensation for the harm she'd caused. One of the board members asked if she'd spoken to Kelvin yet. Rose said no. She was going to do that now. She called Kelvin from the conference room. He answered on the 3rd ring. Sounded tired. Rose asked if he could come to the office. Kelvin said he was suspended. Rose said not anymore. She needed him to come in. Please. Kelvin arrived 40 minutes later. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Rose met him in the lobby. She'd make him go to HR. She brought him straight to her office. She told him everything. Showed him the document he'd left. Showed him the audit results. Told him about the dashcam footage. Told him Marcus was gone. Then she did something she rarely did. She apologized. Not a corporate apology. A real one. Said she'd failed him. That she let her own fear turn her against the one person who'd been loyal to her. That she was sorry. Truly sorry. Kelvin just sat there for a minute. Then he asked why she believed Marcus. Rose said the truth. She said she'd been scared. That Marcus had been whispering doubts in her ear for months. That she started seeing threats everywhere. That when she woke up that morning with gaps in her memory, Marcus's story fit the narrative she'd built in her own head. She'd been paranoid. And paranoid people believe the worst. Kelvin asked what happened now. Rose told him about the promotion, about the public apology she was going to make, about the compensation. She asked if that was enough, knowing it probably wasn't. Kelvin was quiet for a long time. Then he said something Rose didn't expect. He said he understood, said he'd been afraid too, afraid that telling her the truth would hurt her more than staying silent. They both made choices based on fear instead of trust. Rose felt something crack in her chest. This man, this good man she'd almost destroyed, and he was sitting here empathizing with her. She asked if he'd accept the promotion. Kelvin said yes, but he wanted one thing. He wanted the truth. Always, no matter how ugly, no matter how hard, if they were going to work together, they had to trust each other. Rose agreed. They shook hands. Not as CEO and employee, as equals. That afternoon, Rose called an all-hands meeting, the entire company. She stood in front of everyone and told them what happened, not the sanitized corporate version, the truth, that she'd falsely accused Kelvin, that Marcus had been manipulating them all, that she let her own paranoia hurt an innocent person, that she was sorry. She announced Kelvin's promotion, announced Marcus's termination, announced that things were going to change, starting with her. When the meeting ended, people surrounded Kelvin, apologizing. Some were genuine, some weren't. Kelvin could tell the difference, but he accepted them all with grace. Later that day, Kelvin picked up Leo from school. His son asked if work was better now. Kelvin said yes. Much better. Leo asked if the people figured out he didn't do anything wrong. Kelvin said they did. Leo smiled, said he knew they would, because the truth always comes out. Kelvin hugged his son and hoped that was true. 3 months passed. Kelvin was good at his new job. Really good. He restructured operations the way he planned. Efficiency up by 23%. Employee satisfaction up. Cost down. The board loved him. More importantly, the team respected him. But the best part wasn't the job. It was a relationship with Rose. They'd become partners. Real partners. She trusted him. He trusted her. They made decisions together. Challenged each other. Built something better than either of them could have built alone. Rose changed too. She wasn't the ice queen anymore. She ate lunch with people. She left the office before 8 p.m. sometimes. She laughed more. The company culture shifted. People weren't terrified anymore. They were engaged. One Wednesday, the company hosted an ethics seminar. Kelvin was asked to speak. He almost said no. Public speaking wasn't his thing. But Rose encouraged him, said people needed to hear from him. So Kelvin stood in front of 200 employees and told his story. Not all of it, but enough. He talked about the night he drove Rose home, about the choice he'd made to stay silent, even when it cost him everything, about how his son taught him that doing the right thing wasn't about looking good. It was about being good. He told him something Leo had said, that if you know you did the right thing, it doesn't matter what other people think, because you know the truth. And the truth is what you have to live with every day. The room was silent when he finished. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. Some people were crying. Kelvin stepped down from the podium feeling embarrassed, but also relieved, like he'd said something that needed to be said. After the seminar, Rose asked him to get coffee, not in her office, at the little cafe down the street, like regular people. They sat outside. It was a nice day. Rose thanked him for the speech, said it was exactly what the company needed. Kelvin said he just told the truth. Rose smiled, the real smile, the one that reached her eyes. She said she wanted to tell him something she should have said months ago. She said that morning when she'd accused him she'd been terrified, not of him, of herself, of what she'd told him while drunk, of losing control, of being vulnerable. She projected all that fear onto him, made him the threat instead of facing her own weakness. And in doing that, she'd almost destroyed the one person who'd actually been protecting her. Kelvin said he got it, said he'd made a choice based on fear too. Fear of hurting her, fear of exposing her. They'd both been scared. They'd both made mistakes. Rose asked if he regretted it, staying silent, letting Marcus almost win. Kelvin thought about it. Then he said no, because if he'd exposed Rose's secret to save himself, he wouldn't be able to look at himself in the mirror. He wouldn't be able to look at Leo and tell him to do the right thing. Some things matter more than jobs, more than money, more than reputation. Integrity was one of those things. Rose said she'd learned that from him, that watching him choose integrity over self-preservation had changed her, made her realize she'd been so focused on protecting the company that she'd forgotten what the company was supposed to stand for. They sat there for a while, just drinking coffee, not as CEO and senior director, as friends. Real friends who'd been through hell together and come out better for it. Kelvin's phone buzzed. Text from Leo's school. There was a thing next week. Parents were invited to come talk about their jobs. Leo had signed Kelvin up. Kelvin showed Rose a text. She laughed, asked what he was going to tell a bunch of second graders about operations management. Kelvin said he'd probably talk about helping people, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. about how the best leaders are the ones who protect the people who can't protect themselves. Rose said that sounded perfect. Then she said something that surprised him. She said she'd been wrong about a lot of things. But the thing she'd been most wrong about was thinking she had to do everything alone. That asking for help was weakness. That vulnerability was dangerous. Kelvin had taught her that wasn't true. That vulnerability could be strength. That the people who help you when you're at your lowest are the ones you can trust when you're at your highest. They finished their coffee, walked back to the office together. Rose had a board meeting. Kelvin had a team review. Normal work stuff, but it felt different now. Better. That night, Kelvin picked up Leo from school. They stopped for ice cream. Leo asked how work was. Kelvin said it was good, really good. Leo asked if his boss was still mean. Kelvin laughed, said she was never mean. She was just scared. And scared people sometimes do mean things. But when they're not scared anymore, they can be pretty great. Leo thought about that while eating his ice cream. Then he said he was proud of his dad, for helping his boss even when she was mean, for doing the right thing even when it was really, really hard. Kelvin felt his throat get tight. He pulled Leo into a hug right there on the sidewalk, told his son he was the best thing that ever happened to him, that everything he did was to make Leo proud, to show Leo what it meant to be a good man. Leo said he already knew, because he watched his dad every day, and his dad was the best. 6 months after everything happened, the company threw a party. 1-year anniversary of Rose's tenure as CEO. The company had doubled in value, landing new contracts, expanding, thriving. Rose gave a speech, thanked everyone, but then she did something unexpected. She called Kelvin up to the stage, told everyone that the company's success wasn't just because of strategy or metrics or market conditions. It was because of the people. People like Kelvin who chose integrity over ambition, who chose truth over safety, who chose to do the right thing even when it cost them everything. She said Kelvin had saved the company, not by being smart or ambitious or political, by being decent, by being loyal, by being exactly who he was even when everyone told him he was wrong. The room erupted in applause. Kelvin stood there feeling uncomfortable, hating being the center of attention, but also feeling something else. Pride, not in himself, in what they'd built together, in the culture they created, in the fact that doing the right thing had actually mattered. After the party, Rose pulled him aside, handed him an envelope, said it was a bonus for everything, for the investigation he'd done on Marcus, for driving her home, for staying silent when it would have been easier to speak, for believing in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Kelvin opened it. The number made him dizzy. It was more money than he'd ever seen. Enough to fully fund Leo's college. Enough to buy a new car. Enough to stop worrying for a while. He looked at Rose. She just smiled, said he'd earned it, every penny. Kelvin thanked her, not just for the money, for the second chance, for the trust, for becoming the kind of leader he'd always hoped to work for. Rose said she should be thanking him, because he'd shown her what leadership really meant. Not control, not perfection, not always being right, but having the courage to admit when you're wrong, the strength to trust the people around you, the wisdom to value character over credentials. They shook hands. Then Rose did something she'd never done before. She hugged him, just a quick hug, but it meant something. It meant they'd both survived. They'd both grown. They'd both become better versions of themselves. Kelvin went home that night and told Leo about the bonus. Leo asked if they were rich now. Kelvin laughed, said not rich, but comfortable, safe. Leo asked if that meant they could get a puppy. Kelvin said maybe. They'd talk about it that night After Leo was asleep, Kelvin sat in his kitchen and thought about everything that had happened. How close he'd come to losing everything. How easy it would have been to make different choices. To expose Rose's secret. To save himself by destroying her. But he hadn't. He'd chosen integrity. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked out. Not because the world was fair. Not because good people always win. But because sometimes, if you're lucky, the truth comes out. And when it does, the people who stood by it are still standing. Kelvin thought about what he'd tell Leo tomorrow. About how this whole thing proved that doing the right thing matters. That integrity isn't just some abstract concept. It's the thing you have to live with every single day. It's the thing you see in the mirror. It's the thing your kids learn by watching you. And that matters more than any job. More than any amount of money. More than any title or promotion or recognition. That's what Kelvin would tell his son. That's what he'd tell anyone who'd listen. Do the right thing, even when it costs you, even when nobody's watching, even when everyone thinks you're wrong. Because at the end of the day, integrity is all you really have. And once you lose it, no amount of success can buy it back. Kelvin Brooks had almost lost everything by choosing integrity. But in the end, he'd gained something more valuable than he'd ever imagined. He'd gained self-respect. He'd gained real friendship. He'd gained the ability to look his son in the eye and know he'd lived up to the lessons he was trying to teach. And that was worth everything. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then also drop in the comment section if you would like part 2.